Where to start with the Geto Boys? 5th Ward, Houston, Texas. Members came and went in the late 80s, but it was the trio of Bushwick Bill, Scarface and Willie D that really had an impact. In 91, when Mind That Playing Tricks on Me came out, that went huge, and this really put them on the map. It was up until this point in 91, and hearing from owner and pioneer and mastermind of Rap-A-Lot Records, Lil J's amazingly enlightening autobiography, The Art and Science of Respect, the label was having the usual struggles of getting heard in the industry. But that was all about to change when Lil J made a game-changing distribution deal with Warner over Geffen. At a time when political and controversial rap was selling out everywhere, distributors were getting, and labels were getting a bit nervous about linking their brand to the labels or artists. Such artists like Public Enemy, I remember, Ice-T, NWA, Paris, Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy. So hence the timing was perfect when this was all bubbling up for Lil J to articulate a nice deal. And as we all know, the majors can't resist the greed when it's on the table. Meanwhile, Geffen Records, who refused to put the album out, lost out on sales and had their reputation trashed. And when the album went platinum, We Can't Be Stopped, where Bushwick Bill is on the cover with Willie D and Scarface on a hospital bed after having been shot in the eye by his girlfriend. No advertising is bad advertising, as they say. But let's go back to '89 when Grip It on That Other Level came out, which is a stone cold classic for those that know. And shout outs to Ready Red, who went too soon from the Geto Boys and went too soon from life. This album was ahead of its time, and it holds that longevity of an album that can only come organically. And Ready Red was really on point with this production. G.E.T.O was starting to find his feet as well. And Ready Red was actually a founding member of the Geto Boys, and it would be his last album here. But this album, it was raw, it was energetic, it was fun, political. And if you take life too seriously, you could be offended by some of it. And if that is the case, then enjoy being offended. But back to 91, We Can't Be Stopped, which to me it was odd that album was such a success compared to Grip It on That Other Level, as it's for sure the weaker album of the two. But it shows the power of what a single can do back then. Mind Playing Tricks on Me was the key that escalated them to new heights in hip hop, but certainly not in a mainstream way. I was only 14 at the time, and I remember my mum tutting and frowning at the Beastie Boys and Public Enemy when they were on top of the pops, and I thought how unimpressed she would be if she knew I was blasting out the Geto Boys stuff on my Walkman. 1993 comes and Willie D leaves the group and Big Mike steps into his shoes. And Willie D's timing is really off here because Til Death Do Us Part album was a complete success. I mean, N.O. Joe and Mike Dean added their input as well as G.E.T.O, some of the dopest producers. A team never matched since, in my opinion. I remember buying Rap Sheet and seeing this album on the back page with Ice Cube quoting it as their best album yet, and totally agree with that. And this album is one of their best. You know, it was unlike anything before it. It was the definition of that rough, rugged, and raw sound of the South, and it was refreshing. You know, the accents coming from the South. Scarface comes into his own on this album. Likewise does Bushwick Bill in terms of laying down his authority and presence on the tracks. Big Mike was just like Willie D in the sense that the Geto Boys were never really born as a group. You know, they were a bunch of individuals thrown together really, and Big Mike followed suit with Willie D after this album, got a taste for solo career. It'll be his only album with them. But he put in his work here for sure, you know, never sounding out of place. And check out the track No Nuts, No Glory. R.I.P. to Lord 3-2 of the Convicts. He was ace. You know, and that album had Bring It On track, which was a posse cut, which I just adored. You know, and I went and investigated every rapper. I think there's like 14 rappers on that track. When I went and looked and hunted down every one of them, and they all had their own albums coming out, which all came out pretty quickly after that album. And this was a great time for Rap-A-Lot Records. You know, and you know, it was when they created their sound for me. This was when the Rap-A-Lot sound was really, you before Outkast or before Goody Mob of the South. That sound was really typified by that album, Til Death Do Us Part. So 1996, and this is contender for Geto Boys' best album, and for me it just came out of nowhere. I didn't see it coming, and the first I heard it was on a Tim Westwood radio show. I was walking along with my Walkman on, and the first track that I heard of this album was Geto Boys and Girls. And it wasn't until I heard Willie D's verse come in at the end that just made it for me. It was just... because I'd heard Big Mike had left by this point, and I thought Geto Boys might dissolve. So when I heard this track, not only is it a brilliant track, which to me represents Geto Boys, that track, Geto Boys and Girls, check it out. It was just so good, and the whole album was amazing. That whole album for me is probably Geto Boys' best bit of work, The Resurrection, which came out in '96. Yeah, flawless. 1998 saw The Good, The Bad and The Ugly released, which would see Bushwick Bill sit out this time and take a break, and it would be just Willie D and Scarface, but with plenty of guests on it to make up for Bushwick Bill's place. Living for the Moment, Eye for an Eye, Why You Playing, I Don't F With You, they're pure quality tracks from the South. The production is a bit lighter than the earlier stuff here, more suited to 1998 hip-hop, the way the direction was going. But there's no doubt this album is up there with their best work for me. Similar to Scarface's classic My Homies, which is where Scarface uses his platform to put on other rappers. And as hip-hop started to get less dark around this point and a bit more self-promotion and bling, this album would be a top-grade album at the time, released by the Geto Boys. Now, they did release the album The Foundation many years later, but to me it was okay, but I don't know, it was as though the time had gone. But anyway, that's my introduction. This is meant to be the best years of the Geto Boys, so that's where I'm going to close it for now. So this is my top 10, not easy because there's so many tracks, and it's difficult to find 10 that include all the Geto Boys, which is what I wanted to do. But these are my favourites. They always did the harder stuff the best for me. So that's my introduction to the Geto Boys, the hardcore, raw, political, street rap of the Geto Boys. I focused on tracks that included all the Geto Boys, Scarface, Bushwick Bill and Willie D, and Big Mike's on a track. And it's not easy because there were so many solo tracks that were good as well, but that's for another time. In my opinion, you'll struggle to hear a harder, more authentic rap trio, along with such fitting production to go with it, to match this.